Um, like they made it worth it to like actually claim systems instead of just vassal feeding. Because my God, vassal feeding is way harder now.
So my little lizard people or my little aquatic lizard people who worship the space dragon, who like to have a sort of a feudal space empire, are actually a viable play strategy now.
Yes, although Here Be Dragons is a terrible origin.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also fun.
However, there's a couple of new origins that are really, really good. There's the Cave Dwellers, which when you stack with lithoids. So the Cave Dwellers, they have a lot of other neat things, but you can build as many mining districts on a planet as its size now. So you can stack that with lithoids and get pretty crazy. There's Feudal Vassal, where you actually start off as a vassal to somebody. And effectively what ends up happening sometime around like 2240, 2260, somewhere in that neighborhood, it falls apart. And they already have several other vassals for them. And so what happens when they fall apart is it kind of starts this imperial civil war that you can become the new leader of the empire, if you so choose. Or you can just break away and let them like fall apart. But there's 3 other new origins. Like they introduced a ton of new origins with this update. There's 3 different types of vassals that when they first introduced it, the AI was hilarious. It didn't take into account relative size for vassals. So I literally just met somebody who was just as strong and made them my vassal. I'm like, all right, guys, this is wrong. Just incorrect. And like you couldn't change because you have to like change their contracts. You don't automatically get to integrate a vassal anymore.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it. Also, there's now a new megastructure called a planet ring that is also really cool.
And making sure that the stream is working because it's acting like it's not working.
Yeah, I've been having that issue. I probably need to go see a doctor.
All right, appears to be working at least on YouTube. I don't know what's happening with Twitch. But either way, it's working. So I guess while we're talking about origins, new origins, we find out Picard's old new origin in this season of Star Trek Picard.
It's like, let's make it as sad as possible.
Yeah, let's be like, yeah, that Picard guy. You know that guy from that show you used to like? Yeah, guess what? He's also dealing with long-term childhood trauma. That's actually why he's so isolated and doesn't talk to people or let people in.
I guess. I mean, in his defense, like he did something out of pure unconditional love, and his mother used it to kill herself. So, in his defense, that might have an effect on someone.
Yeah, that might have an impact on your.
Yeah, that may make you a bit guarded.
So, in case it wasn't spoilers.
Well, yeah, we're gonna spoil the hell out of this.
We're gonna talk about that today on Red Shirt Rejects.
So there's a lot to talk about. This is a significant improvement from season 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk about general high level, like what we thought about the season overall before we get into the granularity.
I did not like the Soon storyline. And like, it's not like this is terrible. It felt very unnecessary and it felt very forced, and I would have rather focused on other people. So again, that's why this season is better, because you're not like necessarily shoehorning in, like, it's still not good, but it's not like weighing down the show from all this other stuff. You're trying to do 8 different storylines and nothing is hitting.
Yeah, I feel like overall I actually enjoyed this season from beginning to end. I wasn't like, I don't know, my engagement with Picard season 1 was I was incredibly invested in the first like hour. And then it's like they earned a lot though from me because like I loved it so much. I was like 5 episodes in before I was like, is this good?
Yeah.
And after Riker leaves, it's like, oh no, this is just straight up not good, dog. So it was the moment they killed Hugh for me that did it. I was like, oh, this isn't good.
For me, it was Icheb, where I knew it was like, yeah, it was a little bit, but I'm like, they're just gonna fucking kill random people just to prove points, and nothing matters and everything, and I'm like,
yeah, and so I feel like even though, like, obviously dark things happen and there's a serious tone this whole season, it does feel like the tone is still like not as grim dark as it was in season 1. Season 2 was like fairly like it was weird. It was like kind of lighthearted and really heartwarming in the end, but it's wearing the veneer of being like this serious Star Trek.
It felt it was a very weird fusion that I don't think quite landed, but it was good enough. I'm talking about season 2 of Voyage Home and First Contact. Like it felt like they were trying to like fuse those 2 movies together.
Yeah,
and it didn't quite work. But it wasn't necessary. But it was less about I'm going to spit this food out and we're never going to talk about this, and more like this needs more work.
It's because like I guess in doing so obviously they're taking the 2 most popular time travel Star Trek stories and fusing them together, and there's a lot of direct homages to both in the show. So like it's very self-conscious about the fact that it's doing that thing, with also in my opinion a bit of Terminator as well.
Oh yeah,
there's a little bit of a little touch of that in that, and which makes sense considering the showrunner for this season is the same guy. Terry Matalas is the same guy who did 12 Monkeys. So the time travel aspect makes sense from that perspective because he's very into time travel shows.
And I want to get this off my chest.
Yeah.
I hate time travel. I think it's incredibly overdone. I didn't like this, but I didn't hate it. Which, frankly, if you can make me not hate a time travel show or a time travel season, you're not doing terrible. Like I did not like the concept, but with the concept they have, I felt like for the most part they pushed it as far as they could in the most interesting ways they could.
Yeah, I do feel like that. Like in Picard season 1, a lot of it felt sort of shorthanded. A lot of it felt not fully thought through or thought out by the end of it. But with this, everything felt pretty good.
I think Mass Effect did really well. Let's just combine it. Let's just throw Picard and the Mass Effect.
The thing about it that I liked is that it did feel like from beginning to end, they knew what was going to happen in the story. Mm-hmm. They thoughtfully planned all the things out. They knew, and they not only that, they knew enough of the lore of Star Trek to do really interesting things with Star Trek lore in this. And I want to talk about in its own separate thing. Mm-hmm. And also at the same time, man, I lost it. But it was, yeah.
Well, so they did something with wrapping up the Q stuff. They subverted my own expectations for Kurtzman era Trek, which I really appreciated. Like Q even said, almost like winking to the camera, not everything has to be a galactic level threat. And it was literally just, like he did all of this just because he was dying, and he wanted to make sure his favorite pet would be taken care of.
Exactly, and it's like the bit that was what I was wanting to get, is it feels like this season they're actually plugged into the nature of Star Trek in the same way that like Lower Decks is, and the way that we're seeing now that Strange New Worlds is as well. They're learning that they're zigging at the appropriate time, and they're zagging at the appropriate time. They're bringing in the right canon elements to talk about and mess with and revise. They're doing it thoughtfully in a way that doesn't feel like they're doing it thoughtfully. They're like taking care of like it, and you can tell they're trying is the thing. Like, the things that have pissed me off about the most recent Star Trek is when you can tell they're not trying. They're just trying to put a product out, and they're not really careful with it.
And like the more I'm thinking about this, I actually may rewatch this season.
Yeah, there's stuff now that I want to reanalyze and revisit. Yeah.
And this is a rare instance where the more I'm thinking about season 2 of Picard, the more I'm liking it.
Well, and that's like the touches that they do that I really enjoyed. Like, obviously, you've got the obvious references to the movies, but they do two interesting canon things that I've always wanted to see sort of clarified, which is one, making the timeline of like the early 21st century make coherent sense, because it's never fully, like, everybody keeps adding stuff to that time period, and it keeps convoluting the timeline of like what actually happens from the 90s into, you know, World War III and First Contact. And they really finally streamline it in a way that makes sense with the eugenics wars. So that was very cool. I liked that, which is the only real good thing I can take away from the bloat that was in the season. But they give me that, and they also give me this, a third one I completely forgot about, Elorians. We actually learn about Elorian culture and like what they kind of are, and why all these weird things that they did with Guinan make sense now.
They're effectively bridges. Like they function as bridges between various temporal entities and our universe, and which was really cool. Like way to be interested. And that's another thing. They're taking these elements that I frankly have stopped caring about long ago, and they're like, let's play with them. Let's see how much mileage we can get out of them. And that's pretty good, guys. Like, this is how you do prequel stuff. This is what you do, and I'm digging it.
Yeah, and the Mr. Ship is joining us. Once he's set up, I'll
what?
Hey,
here we are.
Why are you sideways?
Hold on, let me fix that. No, I saw Kyle.
Well, now it's upside down.
Your mic's still kind of down.
Yeah, hold on. Is that...
I can hear you, but you're far away.
All right.
I'm
just gonna have to be like this. All right.
Okay.
What? This is so distracting.
You know what? First off.
Yeah. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. You're going to do nothing about it.
Second of all, I think literally I just need to go to.
Trying to figure out how to adjust sound.
You should be able to adjust my volume on your own.
How does one do that?
So, guys, for those of you who are just joining us, we are three grown men tinkering around with settings.
Right. Well, damn it! Hey, it's not the first time I gotta do it. So just look at my name on the left, on your left-hand side.
Yes.
And you should see a volume underneath my...
If anyone needs to go take a pee break, now would be a good time to sort of do that. Just FYI.
Then you should just be able to adjust that.
I'm seeing drag to reorder. I'm not seeing a volume thing.
So I just sound low to you all?
Yeah.
He sounds fine to me.
Oh, okay. Well, then I guess it's just me then.
All right.
Or maybe it's Trevor's audio is really high. I don't know what I'm doing.
Trevor's volume is always high. But it's not, his mic's not hot. That's not the thing. It's just, yeah, we could set the gain to 0 and he would still find a way.
It's because my voice projects.
No, so I legit was trying to get on. I saw your message. I was like, I'm trying to. I didn't have to dance tonight. There were storms in the area, so we're just like, we're not going to ask people to come out and dance tonight. So like, yeah, I'll have time. And I could not get someone out of my house. I was just like, it's like, dude, you gotta get the fucking.
You gotta go. You gotta go.
Oh no.
So why is it all Kenny ship all sideways Kenny?
I'm trying to find these magic buttons.
You don't see like a little slider underneath the photo on the left hand side?
Oh.
That's what controls the master volume.
Okay.
But I think you might have accidentally set me as the highlighted, the spotlighted person.
Oh, I did. I did 100%.
You should see another button that'll let you hit that on the left hand side.
How do you undo the spotlight?
So, for those that don't know, Kyle, in his day job, is a computer programmer.
Oh gosh!
Why can't I?
I'm not even sure what to tell you because this is not. This is not something.
Oh my God!
When in doubt, Google it.
And the longer this goes on, just the worse it is.
Well, I'll keep it going. I'll keep it going.
Yeah. So we're talking about Picard, and how we actually liked it.
I know.
Season 2 of Picard, yeah, it was a huge improvement.
There you go. And I like I said in the chat. So for folks that were watching this live or watching it later, Kyle and Trevor are quite aware. I hated Picard in season 1 and had no desire to watch it week to week. Was not going to put myself through that. Not a chance in hell. Wasn't gonna happen. And every time they made a little comment, I dug in so hard. Gifts and jokes and everything.
Oh, just constant jabbing.
And I have to admit, I was not only wrong, but pleasantly surprised.
And honestly, in your defense, I think you actually had the right idea because this is a show meant to be binged. I think it's infinitely better binged than it is watching it week to week.
Yeah,
because I did end up just devouring it. It was like that kid that eats the cake and it's like, but where did the dog go? It's like, and I'm sure y'all are going to get into it. But there's only, we've talked about it in the thread, so I'm sure we'll get to it tonight. But there's only like really one arc that's just kind of, it's just too much.
I think we'll go into sort of the bloat because we feel like everything was all pretty good individually, but like combined together, there was just a lot happening at all times, and I feel like if they had cut things, that maybe everything would have like gelled at the end really well, and they would have been able to build more toward that instead of surprising us with some things. So enlighten us. What do you think was the thing that bothered you? So I think we all agree with the same thing.
It's freaking Brent Spiner. They don't know how to tell him no. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. He's just like, does he have like some blackmail on somebody? He's just like, you're gonna find a way to squeeze me into this any point you can.
I think the issue is he played one of the most popular characters in Star Trek, and they wanna add a little bit extra star power to it, and so they let him run around. I think that's it.
But all right. Here's why that also doesn't track to me, unless they had already decided they were gonna just like Data's not gonna be in this, right? Now if that was the decision, it's like we're not gonna incorporate him, not gonna make him a prominent part of the show. Then it's like, all right, so here's my Brent joke, but it almost feels a little real because it's just odd how much you keep trying to make this a thing. Why wouldn't you have just kept him around?
Yeah, I feel like that it has to come from one of two things. I know like a lot of them have been because he's aged so much since the last time we saw him. He doesn't appear anything like what he did years ago, and that's just because he got older, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But they instead of like coping with that, they just like minimized that and just created a new role for him. And considering the fact that this season so definitely circumvents that complaint about the actors aging, I think it probably has more to do with he doesn't want to wear the makeup anymore, which I think is also legit because that can't have been fun to do.
And I don't know specifically. I don't know about the makeup, but I know for a fact he hated those contacts with the fiery passion of 1,000 suns.
And when he played the role originally, the contacts were much, much heavier and much, much more uncomfortable. So, like anybody wearing prosthetic lenses, any time before the early 2000s is really like dealing with something very difficult and frustrating to handle as an actor, really just as a person, but like especially more as like an actor because you're wearing those things for like 12 hours a day. Because on TNG they worked 12-hour days, like Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturday.
And I know that he talked about it that at least in the early seasons they were physically painful, like he was in literal pain. So I get that. I get it.
In the visor, it was the having to wear it constantly. Yeah. It's so like I think that might be why, and so because of that, they still feel compelled to have him. So they keep like, here's another Soong. And I will. Last season, there was a story reason for it. This season, although I like what they did, and like I was saying earlier, I really like how it is used as a vehicle to manicure the timeline of the 21st century canon timeline and explaining how we go from, the Bell riots to the eugenics wars to World War III to First Contact. And I like how it did that and how it even integrated sort of Soong into the fact, Soong created Khan. And it sort of makes sense why all the Soongs look the same because obvious genetic manipulation is obvious. He kept effectively cloning himself with genetics. That's been like a theory, a fan theory forever, and now it feels like, this is probably what happened.
Why those genetics are so strong,
right? So I like that, but it felt like it was entirely unnecessary this season. Like you could have cut every inch of that plot line, and you would have lost probably an episode's worth of content at most, and it would have changed virtually nothing about the season.
I mean, that would have been beautiful as like a one shot, like put that entire arc in a little one shot and keep it separate. And hell, we're doing the short treks. So you can't say you don't have a format for it. So I would have enjoyed that a lot more instead of it. It just distracted way too much.
This small intimate project of like a father and his daughter trying to cure his daughter, and then you get the reveal like halfway through, sort of like a what is it, Cloverfield Lane, sort of like you get an event like a switch halfway through, and now it's like, oh, it's no longer this like wonderful like medical story. This is now like a horror movie or a horror thriller, and you start
he's just making use to cure this disease.
He just keeps making use, and you keep dying, and just keeps doing it again and again and again. And he's going to get one right one of these days.
Yeah. That's it. Steven brings up a point. If you cut the Sung plot line, you could have given Rafi and Seven's character development more time to breathe. Yes.
And you absolutely needed more stuff to do.
They do pretty well with the time they're given, but
yeah,
they do. And I was very much like, this is like more shipping has like infected Star rah 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 rah, and I'm like, and I remember somewhere along about halfway through the season, I'm like, wait, am I rooting for these two characters now? No. I am. Hang on. Am I liking this? And now, like Discovery had my two dads, and now Picard has my two moms. So we just need for Strange New Worlds to have like a hetero mom and dad, and like we have a full deck now.
Right, because that is one thing that Star Trek they've had Keiko and Miles, but that was not a functional relationship.
Well, hang on, don't forget all of Worf's many healthy relationships.
Or Picard's many healthy relationships.
Uh-huh. Or like Riker and Troy, who are like, I'd say 60% of the time are healthy.
I would say that's also not a hetero couple, because Riker is not hetero. He is canon, not hetero.
And I mean, Benjamin, if he wasn't a widower, would have healthy relationships.
True.
God, would he have sad boy energy?
I mean, he had sad boy energy.
He did have sad boy. That whole first episode can just be described as sad boy energy.
When it came to like interpersonal relationships, he oscillated between sad boy energy and angry.
I had a thought because I said this on top of Picard, the season one just annoying, like just royally pissing me off. You had Rafi and Seven have that moment at the table, and because they had not paid things off in that first season, I'm like, this feels tacky. Like, why are you? It feels like any kind of kiss that happens at the end of a movie, at the end of a franchise or series, when it's like, you didn't really develop that character.
These two characters are attractive. Now kiss. Like that's what it felt like.
Yeah, and they're like, they planted that seed, and like, we're going to actually. So I feel like it does at least redeem that moment back in season one a lot more in this season. So I appreciate that. Yeah,
I think it very well encapsulates all of season 2 of Picard, where decisions were made. I may not necessarily be happy about those decisions, but by God, we're going to own them, and we're going to make the best thing we can out of this. And you know what, guys? Good job. B+.
Yeah, I really liked everything about that storyline. Like, I do agree that it did feel initially kind of weird because it hadn't been set up properly. And then it's like, not only is that happening, but now we're actually on the other end of it where they've like had their fight and they're kind of broken up, and it's like we've not even got the payoff yet. So it was like this weird like tension for something that we saw that was developed off screen. But even though they started in that such rocky place, I feel like they did a really good job with it. I really enjoyed how they sort of use it to delve into sort of Rafi's toxicity and her coach
Yes.
and they let her work through it. Like they didn't just bring it up and just be like, "Oh, look at this." It was like a whole thing that she had to process and deal with, and also Seven having to deal with all of her Borg baggage was also just really good, and it really felt true to who Seven was as a character.
And I just want to take a moment to talk about Jerry Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Good job. Like just in general, every scene she was in, every scene where she was sort of the center of it, or good job. Like, and it felt like a lot of her character, a lot of the stuff they did felt like it was both a compliment to Voyager, but also a direct inversion to her treatment on Voyager. And I really appreciate that, and I really liked it.
Yeah, because it really is like, because you think about it and you think about all the times that Starfleet encountered the Borg. Because I thought about a lot of this. So I guess we can segue this into the Borg storyline. And the setup is in that first episode, they're hearing a thing and then a Borg ship pops out and they appear to be acting hostile. And it's a very scary, frightening moment. And then Picard tries to blow up the ship and then Q snaps them out of the timeline. And this sort of leads us into an encounter with the Borg Queen, and they're a constant threat throughout the season. And when you think about that initial response of like, well, the Starfleet is like a bunch of kind adventurers, and so they shouldn't be inherently hostile to the Borg, but they're immediately hostile. And it's because obviously we've seen them.
The Borg have always been incredibly hostile and dangerous.
It's always been incredibly hostile and dangerous. So it's like at a certain point, it's sort of like an inversion of like Giorgio and the Klingons in the first episode of Picard or of Discovery, where it's like the Vulcan salute is just you punch Klingons as hard as you can as soon as you see them, and then if you do that, then they'll respect you, and so it's sort of like a learned response now. I thought it was a neat comparison, but yeah, and so there was this like thing like, well, that wasn't very Starfleet, but if you think of every time anybody else from Starfleet met.
No, I thought Picard's actions at the first episode of Picard were completely rational. Like, completely rational.
Well, like, and even Picard tried to use Hugh as a weapon of mass destruction or mass genocide, really, of the Borg. Like, he was going to do that until Guinan talked him out of it. And so you take that in every other experience. The only times we've seen them have any positive experiences with the Borg was on Voyager and was with Janeway. And part of that was obviously out of necessity and the circumstances, because if she had just ran into a random drone out on a planet, she probably wouldn't have rescued them at that time. But because of her experiences with Seven, when they do find Borg babies, of course, they bring them in. But yeah, that's the only time that we see Starfleet react like that. So I felt like that was rational, but then it got into but if you have this reaction to these people every time you see them, then that's going to
how are things going to change?
That's going to inculcate a level of racism within Starfleet toward people like Seven. And so it makes sense why she's not able to be a captain, why she has this animosity with Starfleet now. And the way they build that and thread it through the whole season was really well done, I think.
And racism was kind of the interesting. It wasn't the focus of this season, but it was always the specter constantly over everybody's shoulder. And I also, with the exception of the clinic storyline, that was just that was very much not that was front and center. But every other instance was very much a specter.
Yeah, I love how they. Because, of course, this is the same year that the Bell riots are supposed to happen, which is a thing that's discussed in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, past tense, part 1 and 2. And at the time, these, like, homeless cities were, like, thing that was actually happening in LA at the time, and they were intentionally commenting on it, but they were trying to expand it to be like, this is what the whole like country was like by 2024. And combining that with other actual real life things that are happening now is just like really just that's what Star Trek does. That's what they do well. Like,
and I was pleasantly surprised because, like, coming off of Discovery, which was very much like in your face, obvious. Subtlety is bad. Let's be as in, and whereas this was very much a
okay, Trevor.
Okay. This was more thoughtful, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, but with the Borg storyline in particular, was there any complaints or things that you liked about it or disliked about it?
There's just one thing. It's if Girardi is the Borg Queen that's there at the beginning, that's a problem.
Why didn't she just show her face?
Well, okay, so there's that. But if we're led to believe that the Borg are going to change by their experience with Girardi and the Queen being merged, and assuming they're going to get to the Borg sooner than like if she had been brought back to the current timeline and then started that interaction, because if she comes back at that instance where Q takes them out, and then that's what starts the change in the Borg, then that would and all the interactions in there is you still have all that baggage of Wolf 359, But if she's been there for hundreds of centuries now,
400
and nothing happened. I know she got there for that moment.
Yeah, actually, there is an in-canon explanation for this.
Yes.
So
help me out.
There's an episode of Voyager, and it's an incredibly it's one of those weird one-off good ones where they meet the cooperative, where they are a group. A Borg ship had crash landed on an isolated planet, and it had damaged the collective, and they had been able to fracture a little bit, so they could still hear each other, and their identity was maintained, and so they actually were still individuals, but were also still kind of Borg. Now, I'm not saying that's what this situation was, but it does prove a very good point. Elements of the collective can be isolated from each other, because if she had just balled up in there to try to take over the entire Borg collective, more than likely she would have been assimilated, and the collective as a whole would have reasserted itself, because there are multiple Borg queens as well, and all of them are looking at timelines too. So it would not have. So more than likely, she was off in some isolated pocket of the galaxy, building an isolated Borg collective from people who had physical abnormalities or disabilities, or ships that were on the verge of failing, and being a fairly benevolent, or at the very least benign force in the galaxy. So,
all right. Well, sorry, my initial read, I did not know that. I forgot about that episode.
And the other thing that I was thinking about is because she is the Borg Queen and she can essentially scan through other timelines, and because she's trained in Starfleet methods of preserving the timeline, she was probably able to logic out a way of how to accomplish her goal without necessarily changing the timeline, while also maintaining distance enough from Starfleet so that information doesn't get sucked up into the Starfleet system, and they're aware of it in order to preserve the initial time jump that she would be making.
Because if she
it's a causality loop.
Yeah, like she.
There's okay.
Yeah.
That's better, but now I just didn't. Okay, so it's not as bad as I thought it was, but it's still a dumb time travel
It's
trope.
still a trope.
Dragging it down just a smidge.
I mean, once again, the second you use time travel, the only thing that would have made me not call the premise of this season stupid was if the concept of time itself had been broken. And that explained why people were bleeding off and like certain characters were here, and this wasn't truly time travel. That being said, it is still stupid, but they did a good job with it. Like they took a stupid concept and pushed it as hard as they could and made it as good as they could. And you know what? Turned out okay.
Yeah, honestly, the only complaint I really had about the Borg storyline was that some of the I felt like there probably was a more elegant way to turn Jurati into the Borg Queen. Like those couple of episodes where she's like being evil is a bit much. I don't know. There was just something about it that didn't read right to me. Because I feel like because I don't know, just mechanically world building wise, I'm talking about, it doesn't quite work with me. Like, how is she able to?
It's not how the Borg have ever worked before. Like, there's been one Borg Queen on the Enterprise E at First Contact, and she assimilated Starfleet personnel, and this didn't happen. Like, so I don't understand why Jurati is so special in these circumstances.
Yeah,
she has a deep pit of despair.
She's a goth like me.
Freaking Picard was assimilated, and he literally had the deepest pit of despair ever. So you know what?
Oh yeah.
Like that doesn't hold water either.
Well, no, it's because she's seen through all the timelines, and in every one of them, Jurati is alone, like she is.
I literally rolled my eyes at that. Like, literally rolled my eyes.
It was so good. I loved it.
I'm like, okay, so this is now Star Trek Riverdale. Got it.
Yeah, it was so blatant.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, I don't know what about it. It was like that. But I still liked it. I liked where we got to. I'm very interested in this idea of the Borg to explore because I feel like we've gotten all of the like super zombie Borg, stuff through our system with Voyager. So something that's interesting but still is Borg intrigues me.
And like the concept of the Borg doesn't have to be evil. So it's very. I'm very curious too to see where the hell this is going with Jurati's collective, or maybe it'll be the cooperative or whatever.
All right, the A plot, Picard and Q and Picard's past and his other past. What do we think?
That was such a good head fake. Like they gave me not one but two head fakes, and I was not expecting this franchise to be capable of that, let alone actually doing it. So to find out like the whole time he's been like, oh, his mother was such a good influence. Oh, his mother was so great, and there's this monster in the background.
Right, and this whole time they're signposting real hard that it's Picard's dad's an abusive piece of shit. Just get ready for it. He is.
And no, his dad was a fairly normal, if a bit stern guy in a horrible, horrible situation who tried his best.
Yeah, as you do when your wife is dealing with severe mental health issues. And it's just And James Callis.
Protect her. Right? So good. That was inspired casting.
Because the second I saw him, it's like, oh, okay, he's going to be a bastard.
And when he mentioned,
is that
when they did the thing where what?
No, yeah, Trevor, you hit on something. Yes, no, because casting Baltar on top of what they've already coded for his dad. Yeah, you're once you
You're
start
like,
to figure out that once you start to figure out, oh, that's a representation of his
okay,
dad.
Yeah.
he's
Yes.
gonna.
When he says that he's his father, and you get that switch from like, oh, this isn't a counselor, this is actually his father's specter
Yeah,
talking to him like in Hamlet. Like it's
yeah,
oh
and then it's oh. This is somehow.
You made me feel bad for Gaius freaking Baltar.
I'm like this. Oh, this is somehow sadder than what I thought.
and it was because it was.
And so like I didn't feel like any of this was necessary to understand Picard. There are other facets of his personality and his pain that I would have much rather them focus on. That being said, it's really easy to explain why, your mom is locked in a room and she's asking to be let out. And so you let her out. And this act of total childlike kindness, she kills herself, and you're the one that finds her body hanging in the room that you used to spend so much time together telling fanciful stories.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you get older and you realize those fanciful stories were her illness.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, so now all of your memories and feelings are muddled and confused.
And so like when tragic, because I mean, when you lose somebody who you're very close to and very intimate with, and in such an awful manner, it taints everything else. And there's this like tinge of sadness, and it's really easy to let that infect every other relationship in your life.
Yeah. And I'm very interested in going back and watching Family after having watched this episode to see how it lines up, because I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of can explain the underlying tension between Jean-Luc and Robert and
why his brother hated him,
because they all could maybe blame him for the death of their mother.
Yep. And it could be one of those things to where they've never said it.
Yeah, right.
They've never, and even in a moment of rage and anger, they never said it, but they thought it. And it's this unspoken thing hanging over, where if you just done as you're told, she'd still be alive. But again, you don't do as you're told. You go off across the galaxy running away, because that's what you do. And that's
rough, buddy.
Yeah, that's rough, buddy. There's that's a lot of family counseling that's needed there. It's a lot of family counseling.
I'm about to say it'll never be, because they're all dead.
Yeah, they burned alive. They burned in the fire.
They burned in the fire.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all dead.
They're all dead.
And one of the worst ways to die. So.
Yeah. So Picard.
So anyway, Picard's sad for reasons.
Yeah, and it's and I agree with you. It is one of those things where it feels like we didn't have to tell this story. This was not a story that I particularly needed to fill in to explain why Picard is the way he is, because I've always felt that many of those feelings could be attributed to any number of other things. But this being the story that it is and the story that they wanted to tell, I think that overall they executed it pretty well, although I will say it dragged in the middle of the season, because they were still trying to hide the mystery and obscure it at the same time. They were trying to hide and obscure the mystery, but they were at the point where they needed to start giving me more information, and the more information they gave me was just conflicted and confusing and not very clear. And so I got irritated with them up until until the part where his father shows up. That was when I got interested in it again. But prior to that, it just was like, God, we're doing this again.
I pushed that aspect of the storyline. Like, why do we keep focusing on this? It's not the most interesting storyline. Like, come on, guys.
It still wasn't the most interesting storyline, even though it was the A plot.
Yeah.
Because it turns out...
Well, it was... Oh, go ahead.
I was about to say, well, because it turns out that was the whole reason Q started this mess.
Yeah, because it's like you needed to work through... Like, Q was therapy.
My boy needs therapy, and I'm going to die, and nobody's going to be able to give this to him because he has to experience it for himself. So I'm just going to concoct this scenario, and just see what happens.
And in Q's defense, it's not like if Picard was ever put into therapy, like there's few people in the world who like he could just deflect it infinitely. Like he would completely run circles around a therapist, because unless a therapist dug into his records and said, "Oh, your mom committed suicide," that must have like really affected you.
And I haven't, given the way that they frame him in the later episode, I'm curious if his father might have actually been a therapist. I'm not sure if they established that or not, but I'll probably go back and check.
And I would not be surprised, because of just the whole English aristocracy vibe of that family, if she didn't die of suicide. She tripped, or there was an accident, and there's no reason for people to know what really happened.
Oh, and establishing the historicity of the Picards was an interesting canon decision. And by also being like, well, actually, the Picards left France after World War II, and they didn't come back until recently, which is why I have an English accent.
Yeah, and why they're Frenchmen who like they're the most English Frenchmen in the world. Yeah. So yeah, that was fun. That was fun that they fixed that.
Okay, all right. We got to talk about that last Q moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Actually, let me comment on something Steven said, because he also commented on the writing in the middle. It seemed like it was disjointed. It seemed like the other characters just forgot about Girardi for no reason. That did happen.
Mm-hmm.
But
we got to circle back to that.
But good thing they stuck the landing to end the season. Yep. They seem to very much tell the story of Patrick. Or sorry. It seemed to me very much the story Patrick Stewart wanted to tell, because of his own history of abusive family dynamics, modified enough to make it right for Picard. I actually did not know that about Stewart's background.
His dad was a World War II vet who had severe PTSD, and that wasn't something that and he was not I believe in Patrick Stewart's own words, he was not a kind man. And there's a lot, like you can tell when he talks. There's this great, to the audience, there's this great 2020 interview that Patrick Stewart did on NPR that I would strongly, it's like an hour long. And he goes in depth about like a lot.
Fresh Air with.
Yes. And like there's a lot of regret in his voice when he talks about his father, and how if he knew then what he knew now, things would be very, very different. So I feel like that, but again, that was a good head fake, because I knew that about Patrick Stewart, and so I assumed it was going to be the dad. And it wasn't. I mean, maybe it still was. Like his dad could have turned into a somewhat abusive guy in the aftermath of that.
Yeah.
But it's understandable is not the right word, but easy to see how that could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that bleeds into Q's like final moments with us. It's
Which I didn't like. I was like, this is heartwarming.
I don't know how that happened. That came out of nowhere. Like, I'm watching it and I'm feeling, and all of a sudden I'm like, what's this? Is this feelings?
Yeah.
Oh my God, am I crying? Like,
I did not cry, but I was like, what are you?
Well, and I think, I don't know, it might have just been because to prep for, not really prepping, it was just a spur of the moment. It was Cinco de Mayo, and I was like, there's one episode of Picard. Oh, we lost Kenny.
Commander ship joined.
There we are. There he is.
I lost Charles' audio for a second.
Yeah, that was weird. But I guess I think it was because I had watched, what is it? Not Q-less. Deja Q beforehand, because that's the if you search through Star Trek GIFs, the one where Q is dressed up like a mariachi and he's playing the trumpet and he's got the band behind him. And so I was like, it's Cinco de Mayo. This is like the only festive episode for that I can find in Star Trek. Probably.
I believe that's the episode that also has the single best Worf line in all of Star Trek, where Q is saying, "What must I do to convince you that I'm human?" And Worf says, "Die."
And the whole episode is about Q facing mortality for once, because he's been made human, and him exploring like what being mortal means and what feelings are, and like how all of these humans have to carry around all this stuff in them forever. And so it was already thematic within that unknowingly. And then I'm watching the scene and it's like connecting all of these thematic threads from this experience to this moment where it's like, oh, Q just, because like at the end of the episode, the way the episode ends is he's been palling around with Data this whole time, and Data has been talking about how he's essentially always wanted to experience being human because he'll never know what it is to laugh and cry and do these other things. And of course, Q is like having to deal with all these emotions. So at the very end of it, he gives him a parting gift, and he lets Data laugh, essentially. And so Data laughs, and it's the same thing he does in this, where it's like, I'm going to die. I want to leave Picard with something because I like him. I want him to not die alone. Yeah, that just rocked me.
And it goes even deeper because Q didn't want to die alone.
Yeah.
And he knew he was going out, and so he was like, okay, I'm going to die. There's no way of stopping this. I'm going to go out on my terms. I'm going to go out with the closest thing I've ever had to a friend.
But so in the episode, in Deja Q, there's a whole thing where it's like just before Q leaves to go suicide himself, and he's in the office with Picard, and Picard's basically like, listen, you're a piece of shit. I'm not going to console you. I'm not going to help you out. You're responsible for giving a lot of people pain. I am not your shoulder to cry on, basically, while Q is going into this whole thing about him, like, essentially wanting to die because he hates being human. And so it's like he knows that Picard isn't really going to console him, because every time he's faced Picard in these circumstances, Picard has reacted the same way. And this time, like, the shell breaks. He gives him a hug,
and it was like, well, because it was, because this is only the second time Q's ever been really the third time if you count the laughing Data, entirely altruistic in his motives.
But Picard has never believed him. There is never a moment in their history where Picard ever believes that Q is being honest with him.
Yep. Like, the only time you ever see that doubt emerge is when he goes back in time and when Picard got stabbed in the chest, where after that's all over, he's like, what was that? Like, was that even Q? Like, what was that?
Yep.
And so I feel, and I feel like that was the kernel of doubt. And then he's like, Q, there's something wrong with Q. Like, his powers aren't working right. He's not working right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
and maybe if he didn't have Guinan confirming that Q was dying, then he might not have believed him. But I think everything at that point slotted in enough that it worked.
I also think Picard in that moment was much more tender than he would have been otherwise. Like he had the skeleton key in his hand.
Yeah.
He could have just put that in his pocket and changed all of history. And
I know. I keep thinking about that. Like he had it in his hand and he put it right back to where he was going to find it.
Mm-hmm. Like even tried to move the stone to where it was just the way he remembered it.
Yeah.
And I really wish somebody else had been there to ask him why he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because
if it was TNG, then that would have happened. Riker would have been there or something, and then he would have had the opportunity to go into it.
And because I mean, obviously, I think there's enough to work through context that we know, but I would have just loved to have heard his thinking on it.
Yeah.
Oh, Steven. Sometimes you gotta stab that Nausicaa, even if you know it's gonna hurt.
That is true. This is not the first time that he's done that. But yeah, I feel like they could have done a bit better with that storyline, because I do feel like it was a bit muddled and mystery boxy. It was more mystery boxy than I like. I don't like mystery boxy storytelling.
It needed to be. But
they paid it off. So they at least paid it off. I was concerned that this would not be paid off, but it was, and they made it work. I don't think it gels at all with the Borg story.
Nope.
I think the stories are almost diametrically opposed. They don't fit together, because I feel like when you're doing so, it's like the Batman and Robin problem is what I keep referring to it. But you've got too many villains, you've got too many of these conflicting story arcs, and none of them are complementary to the other. So you could have made any number of these work together by probably removing a few of them. And then like the whole I enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed the Rios storyline, because I love Rios, but you also could have cut that entire plot line too. And it would have been fun.
Yeah.
It would not have changed anything in the show if Rios and all of his stuff had been completely cut out. And that's kind of upsetting, because you could have cut out, because the same thing applies to Jurati and the Borg Queen. You could cut them out, and overall the entire series, the entire season is the same. You could cut out Seven and Rafi and keep everything else, and overall the entire season is the same. And that's kind of upsetting, honestly.
Okay, I don't disagree, but I do think there's a thematic thing happening with Rios and Girardi that you can find parallels. And so I agree with you. Functionally, yes, you take them out, but I think about where they ended up helps me fix this weird image I had when they were on the bridge. Because when he's on the bridge of the Stargazer, I'm like,
it doesn't fit.
You don't. Neither one of you fit here. Like, this is not. And then
they didn't.
But their arcs for the course of the season are revealing that they also need to make some choices about who they are and what that's going to mean for their futures, and we see how that plays out, which parallels with decisions Picard has made in his life and or not made, and having to come to grips with that so that he can heal and move on. But again, you're right. Functionally, you could have thrown someone else in there and saw that parallel, maybe even having more vital to the plot. Hell, you could have had Talon. Was it Talon? Maybe we get to know more about her, and you don't have the rest of the season 1 crewmates, and you focus more on her and flesh that out. I mean, that's how you do that parallel. I don't know, but yeah, you're right.
So I've got work in the morning, so we're gonna have to wrap this up.
So that's how you. That's how
Nice.
You do
That was good. I like it.
I do not believe in subtlety anymore. Like, there's no point. I'm just gonna go out and say it.
No, you're fair.
The only thing left though to mention, and I think this falls under, it was neat but totally unnecessary, was Will Wheaton.
Yeah, it was like, oh, hey, look, we need something to hoover up all the dangling plot threads this season.
Yep, that's exactly. Hey, wait, we got Will Wheaton, don't we? Yeah, we can. He
does an After Trek show, right?
We can use him for a scene, right? Hey, Will, can you tell me?
He can just come in wearing his real clothes.
Yeah, we only need you for a few hours.
Not even that, just a couple of takes. You can read from a prompter, it'll be fine.
It's literally like he was podcasting right next door.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, Will, can you do us a favor and
shove some lines in his chest. It's like, just spit this out.
Yeah.
It's like, I know for a fact Will Wheaton can act. So what the fuck was that? Like, I'm watching the scene and I'm like, man, he is tuning this in. Oh, this is great. They must have had him for 30 minutes to do a quick cameo. Like, there's no way this was this is added last minute. Oh man. It's like they went, okay, we're having all the other original series cast in next season, but we're not gonna have enough time for Will, so let's give him something. Everybody's gonna bitch about it if we don't.
So you and me have talked about Jeff Russo.
And, yes,
just such a nerd. Thank you, Jeff. As a composer, I love. I want to see him continue to do stuff, but he might be creeping into that Giacchino area for me if he keeps that up. Where you're like making callbacks to episodes with the Picard theme, and I really like the change for the season 2 intro. I feel like it just conveyed this is a tight situation. This is rough. There's a lot. I mean, there's high stakes all the time, but really, there's going to be some dire. There's going to be a dire situation if they don't get this, and I think that theme conveyed that really well.
Yeah. I love how it still retained the flute music while also like escalating it. It felt very much kind of like the upgrade in theme from DS9 from season 3 to 4. How that really stepped it up, made it a quicker, faster pace. But the general composing the whole season was like very good. I really enjoyed how they integrated one of my favorite bits of the soundtrack of the score for First Contact, which not the main theme, but like sort of in the end credits, it's after it plays the main theme. It's probably about a minute and a half in, if you ever watch the end credits, but it's just a really wonderful, like subtle, like musical piece. And they are integrating it all throughout this season in different parts as like Picard's theme, and also integrating like the Borg Queen's theme from that. I feel like they did a very good job of making new stuff, but also really utilizing and playing around with like the musical language that Star Trek already has. But I feel like all of these series do that well.
Last thing, because I know Trevor's got to go. So the new actress for Guinan, but she did really solid in the couple scenes. And I appreciate, because that's hard. You got to be.
That is hard. Yeah, I was sitting, me and Robin were talking about it actually, because we were thinking about, Whoopi being on Star Trek, and she doesn't because when I was watching Star Trek, I was a kid. I had no idea who Whoopi Goldberg was really. She was just another one of the cast members. And then going back and then for Robin, like going and watching it, she was like, wait, she's in this? Like, what is happening? Like, why is an Oscar-winning A-lister like in this movie or in this TV show? Like, it's great.
Because that's how bonkers TNG is.
It is. It's crazy.
I mean, everybody wants to be on Star Trek.
but she specifically wanted to be on Star Trek.
You want to be the bartender? What? Yeah, we need a bartender, but you're magic.
Yeah, what was the pitch for it? Like,
I know, right?
how do you sell that to the person that got an Oscar to cover?
You're going to be a magic bartender. Yeah. There's a trope that I'm dancing around here.
Oh no, she's definitely doing magical Negro. It ain't no dancing around. What you mean? Yeah, it's
100%.
All right. Yeah, I was glad I was wrong. Enjoyed it thoroughly, and I know we'll be talking Strange New Worlds soon. And
I'm actually excited for season 3 of Picard when it drops, which I didn't think I would be. I thought it would be like I gotta watch it for the podcast. Which I did come into season 2 of Picard being like, I gotta watch this for the podcast.
This year I've leaned so far into Kurtzman Trek at this point that I'm just like sucking it all up. And it's one thing I want to talk about later when we have more time is like the variety of Star Trek and how they have, whereas every other person trying to build a ecosystem of content or franchises or whatever, everybody's doing it by essentially doing the same thing, like all the Disney, Star Wars, and Marvel stuff is all basically like, instead of doing a bunch of different things, we're all going to do just sort of the same story over and over again. With Star Trek, we are getting like a different, it's like going into an ice cream shop. Like there's just so many different types of flavors of Star Trek right now. You got
to give them credit. They are taking big swings.
They are.
Like how many times have we like complained about Disney like playing it safe?
Yeah.
Like and making really iconic, incredible movies like Rise of Skywalker.
You mean every one of those Star Destroyers has got a Death Star later on it?
You mean every single one of those Star Destroyers is a Death Star?
For me, and this is the thing that most recently pissed me off, was that stupid Vanity Fair article where they were like implying that the whole reason behind why Solo didn't do so good was because fans aren't really good with dealing with like recasts. And that's the thing. That's the lesson we learned from Solo.
That's the problem.
That was Aaron.
Not that you got Phil Lord and Chris Miller on it, writing half the time, and then no. Oh, did we lose a
he's out. But yeah,
sorry.
That was what pissed me off. There it is.
That was upsetting. Anyway, I'm so sorry to the people listening to this that I brought up that movie and started us down this road.
Well,
it's my fault.
I'm just saying, it like in comparison to Star Trek, it seems to be whereas Disney and Marvel are learning the wrong lessons and trying to give fans what they want. The shepherds of Star Trek are actually seems to be retooling on the fly and actively learning to give us new and different things that we actually like variety.
And they're obviously they went from a let's throw everything else out and try to rebuild it, and then it's okay, that was a mistake. Let's use what worked. And then let's tinker around with some of these ideas we've been floating, and let's see what we can take them.
Yeah.
Which I think season 2 of Picard and season 3 of Discovery, and so far what I've seen of Strange New Worlds show a lot of promise.
Yeah, they've gone from consistently pissing me off every week to like, I really like this. Like this is some of the most like. And we'll talk about it when we talk about Strange New Worlds, but it's consistent. It's tipping up there in quality as far as like best TV out right now.
No more talk about Strange New Worlds because that's what we're talking about next week. But
There's your second.
But yeah, we are excited about it. Like, we actually feel good things about it. So, is there anything else we want to talk about Picard Season 2?
No, I'm good. It was enjoyable. I like knowing that I really like the Khan thing. It's like, so here's a little thing about that. So the main reason I really like it is that both characters are named after the same person, a World War II friend of Gene Roddenberry, whose last name was Noonien Soong. And so it was, so they both are referencing the same person.
Okay, that's neat.
Cool.
That person lives on.
Yep.
And then Steven says, +1 on I've loved how this era Trek has shown the capacity to listen and grow. Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
you got All right, and we are going to do another episode on just the overall Kurtzman era. We don't know when, but we're going to do it.
Basically, once ever the content slows down.
Yeah.
Okay.
The fire of Star Trek we keep getting.
Yeah. All right. I'm Trevor Law. Take it easy, guys.